Hi, Interpersonal. This is Mr. Burke, and today I'm going to give you some notes on Chapter 2. We are going to talk about a concept called the communication process. This process is scientifically how you approach studying communication. Just like a lot of other sciences, they create models and scenarios where it explains how things happen. So we're going to talk about communication process. Okay, way back when, they used to have a communication process that was called the linear model of the communication process. Linear model. Okay, and what that meant is it was a one-way line of communication. So imagine this right here is the linear model of communication. It has three parts. The first one is the sender. The sender is the one that comes up with the message. They send it through a device, also known as a channel, to the receiver, and the receiver gets the message. Now, for a long time, that was how they described communication, but the more the science and the study of it evolved, it had to change. It was incomplete. It was no good. So they had to change it. And as they evolved, it changed into something that looks more like this. Now, this is a big, long document, so we're going to have to break it down into smaller parts. And so to do that, we're going to talk through what each of these little symbols mean and the way it's organized. So just like the linear model, it has a sender, it has a receiver, and there's a message. But as you can see, that's not where it ends. There's many other factors, and I think one of the most important factors is that it's not linear. It's a process that is circular, and that is because it includes feedback. So the process is continuous. The communication process is never ending. It goes in a circle. So every time messages are sent, they are also received, and the sender gets feedback. So it goes in a continuous circle. You can think of it this way also if you want. Now, it doesn't end there. There's a lot of other things that happened. So to explain this fully, I'm going to try my best to go from start to finish in communication, but realize there's a lot of things that happen. So first of all, you have to have a sender that has a message, right? They all have something they want to say. Anytime you communicate, you have an idea. Okay, you have your idea. What do you want to say? And this is kind of indicated by these light bulbs, right? Your idea bulbs that happen. When you have an idea, the first thing that you have to do, and you're going to communicate it, the first thing you have to do is think about how that idea is going to be communicated. You come up with the way in which you want to say it. That is called encoding. Think about it like a computer, right? Computers come up with a code, they send it, and it's decoded later. So you have an idea, you choose how you want to say what you're going to say, you encode it, you send it through a channel to the receiver. Now, what kinds of channels are there, right? What does this channel look like? Well, let's back up. Let's talk about types of messages. Let's start over here. Okay, what are the different ways you can send a message? Well, you can speak, verbal messages. You can write. Okay, those two ways are called verbal messages. Is that the only way? No, there's another kind. It's called nonverbal. So now I have two different types of messages. I have things that come out of my mouth, spoken or written, and nonverbal messages. How do I send nonverbal messages? What types are those? Well, I have my appearance. This is the way I look. Okay. Am I dressed up for success? Am I wearing sweatpants? Do I have my hair cut? Do I have my hair done? Do I have makeup on if you choose to wear makeup? Do I have the things that I need in order to look the way I'm supposed to look in a given situation? That's appearance. Also, a nonverbal thing is the way I sound. Now, this may be confused and you think, isn't that a verbal thing? But it's not necessarily. Nonverbal cues are sounds too. The loud or softness of the way you talk. The touch or the sound is loud and soft, fast or slow, high or soft, high or low pitch. Okay, all of those things are nonverbally sent when you communicate. The next one is touch. You can send a message by touching. Think about if somebody's having a really hard day and you kind of put your hand on their back, give them a pat on the back. Or if somebody does a really good job and you give them a fist bump, right? You're communicating different ways. Okay, non-verbally, the other senses, right? Smell, you can communicate that way. You're sending a message, right? You put a bunch of brownies in the oven. You're communicating by smell to the people downstairs. And then also taste, right? There's ways to communicate that way. So those are all channels that you can send communication through, okay? And then so you encode those things. You choose what kind of verbals and nonverbals am I going to use? What am I going to look like? How is it going to sound? And then you send it, okay? And then now we look at channels. What are the different channels? Well, think more sensory-based, right? You see nonverbals a lot of time. You can hear nonverbals and verbals, so sound would be one. Okay, you can touch. The way something feels communicates a message to you. Is it hot? That's communicating. You're learning something. Okay. Same thing with taste and smell. Right. So all your senses are channels for messages to come through. Right. So let's recap. You come up with an idea. You encode it, meaning you choose the type of message, the verbal, the nonverbal, all of that stuff, and then you send it through a channel. The receiver then takes that message and they have to decode the message. And then that turns in for them into an idea. Idea. All right, so they now have an idea in their mind, and the goal is that your idea was the same one that they have. If you do that, now you have actually communicated the way that you want. Okay, and that is communication. Now that doesn't always happen. There are other things that happen to get in the way. Okay, and so let's look at some of the things that get in the way. Well, the first one is interference. Or, depending on where you're looking at, noise. That might help you understand it. And there's a couple different types of noise. There's external noise. External noise are literally sounds that are existing, interfering with what you're saying, what's being communicated. The noisy fan, the door, someone else talking, someone tapping their pencil when you're trying to listen. All of those things are external noises. Then you have internal noises, or internal interference is another way to look at that. And you guessed it, there are 3 different types. First, there is, that was right, psychological noise, things getting in the way mentally. Okay, if you have a lot going on in your mind and you can't get out of it, it's tough to listen to communication. Here's an example. You're out in the hallway, your girlfriend or boyfriend breaks up with you, and now you're just totally in your head about it. You come in and we're going to talk about class. psychologically speaking, it's hard for you to get to that message, right? At the same time, with that same example, emotional interference, right? You're sad, you're crying, people are trying to console you, and you just can't listen to what they have to say because your emotions are getting the best of you. And then the last one is another tough word. It's physiological. Okay, physiological noise. Physiological noise is stuff with your body, right? Let's say it's 4th hour and you're super hungry and you're trying to listen to the teacher talk, and you feel like it's so hard for me to listen to the teacher talk. It's because your body is so consumed with the fact that you're hungry that it's making you focus more on that. So you've got all that stuff going on. So these are different types of interference that get in the way of communication. Okay, and that's going to interrupt the message or make it harder for the communication, the idea that's being encoded, to be decoded properly. Now, there's other things too that get in the way or help depending on the message. The levels of information is what this is called. Okay, and based on who you are, it's the same for the sender and the receiver. Levels of information. So you have a couple different levels here. Okay, first one is cultural level. Okay, your cultural level of information helps you identify and interpret the message. Let's say it's a language thing, right? And somebody's telling you something in another language and you're trying to decode what they say. Different cultures speak in different language, so the cultural thing's going to get in the way. Okay? Or you speak the same language, then it's easy, right? So that level of communication is there. The next one is sociological. The way that I think of these is things like sociological. Things like inside jokes. Okay, if somebody's talking to you about something you don't understand because you're sociologically have differences, then it's going to be hard to communicate. Or if you're in the same kind of mode with them, right? Let's say you're on the same team. You have that together, right? And so it's easy to understand if you're talking about football, if you're talking about soccer, whatever it is, right? If you don't have that shared knowledge, it's harder. And then the last one's individual. Right, and so your individual level of information, your individual knowledge base. Right, let's say I started this lecture or this thing by telling you kind of about everything specifically. Okay, and I started with this model. I said, yeah, I remember this model. You'd be like, no, because you never learned it, right? Individually, you don't have the knowledge. Okay, so same thing with the idea. If you're really smart in one topic, but the person that you're talking to is not, they're going to have a difference of level of information, and so it's going to be harder to communicate. Okay? And so you got to make sure, as the communicator, that you're anticipating what the receiver's level of information, their individual level of knowledge is based on what you're talking about. Okay? And so now there's one more big thing that we haven't talked about. And this one's kind of hiding in the bottom. Okay, context. Context is so important, you guys. Okay, you have to have an awareness of where the communication is happening and for what reason, what time of history, what time of day. Okay, you have to have an awareness of the context because depending on the context, the message can be very different. Let's say, you're at work, right? And you have somebody say, hey, I need your phone number. And you're like, okay, why? And they say, well, in case I have to call you if I'm going to be late or something like that, right? That contextually is generally okay, right? The context of that, yeah, I need your number, that makes sense, right? If you go to a social thing and somebody's like, hey, let me have your number, right? Does that mean something different based on context? What if it's the same person? They're asking you for your number at a social event or asking you for your number at work. Okay, that's different. The context of that thing is different. So you have to be aware of context when you're communicating, both as a sender, okay, are people going to be aware of what you're trying to say and how you're trying to say it, and as a receiver, how something being perceived. So that matters. All of these things influence communication. That's why it's different than the linear model. Okay, this communication process is very big. It's hard. Do you know why? It's because people are complicated. Okay, it's hard to narrow down people into one thing, but researchers and scientists have identified these things impact communication. So we're going to spend some time looking at different ways and giving examples of how the communication process works. Hopefully, as I went through this document, you filled out your copy. If not, there'll be another opportunity, or you can rewind and watch and fill out each one as we go.